Welcome to the sequence of purchasing controlling. What are we going to discuss here? Essentially, three things. First of all, you should, after this short sequence, be able to embed the purchasing planning in the planning process. We would like to discuss a very important distinction between purchasing success and its contribution to company success or to the margin. And finally, you are going to see a model or two of how such a controlling system could look like. How is the controlling process or the annual planning process of purchasing embedded in the planning process of the rest of the company? And this is a very important message here, because purchasing is not a standalone function. It has a very, very important role to play in the entire company. And that is quite obvious. It becomes obvious when you see the planning process. Typically, the planning process starts as a point of departure with the values from last year, which you see on the one side of the graph. So we do know what was the turnover. And then from that, if you move towards the right, then we have to change the expected change in product, take into consideration for the next year. Maybe we are not going to sell exactly the same type of product. We're going to change them a little bit. And that is exactly what we have to deduce from the expected turnover and costs for the future. Then we might have to deduce from that cost savings which come from other fields, other areas of the company. Maybe the production is able to make some savings, so that has to be deduced. And then, and that is what you see here as the yellow block, in our planning, we have to register the savings which purchasing is going to contribute for next year. That means how purchasing is going to reduce the costs of the bought goods. With this, we reach in the center here a basic plan of the target cost. Add to this the changes of volume, and that is the important thing, onto the right side, then the promised profit. And out comes the expected turnover for the future. Now, the promised profit, that is exactly where it all ends up. That's what the shareholders expect, and that's what a company has to fulfill. And for that purpose, a good planning is required. And obviously, what appears to be a linear process here is a process with a lot of interaction and feedback loops. Each department will have to make their contribution and explain what they can deliver. But in the end, this is the plan which has to be finished and made ready. Just to explain this, we are talking about typically a top-down process and a bottom-up process. The top-down process, which you see here, is the expected profit, maybe per business unit. All of this adds then up to the total company's profit, which is being reported or is being forecasted. Now, each business unit will have to make their contribution, and within the business units, each purchasing department will have to make their contribution. And that's the bottom-up process. As you know, purchasing typically distinguishes between diverse commodities which they buy. Would it be metal parts, electrical parts, services, etc., and of course a little bit more detailed segments on that. Now, each of these commodities has to make their own plan. What are they going to expect for the future? How much sales? How much savings? And all of this is consolidated, and then it is fed back into the general corporate planning process. And in the end, a certain target comes out. In our example here, purchasing thinks that 8% could be possible. The demand from the overall planning would be 10%. There may be a risk involved of 2% going up and down. And that is the matter of discussion and of planning. And in the end, the plan stands and purchasing knows what to do. In order to accomplish all these tasks, it is very important to have good data. And that is another reason why purchasing controlling would it be a person or in a larger company, even a little department, is important. A basic thing purchasing controlling has to provide is a spend cube. Who in the company has bought what material, what commodity, from whom, that is from which supplier. This is the basic knowledge needed. We need this for at least two reasons. Number one, for the annual planning. And number two, this also helps on an operative basis because suppliers obviously appreciate a good planning. We have seen that this increases their satisfaction very much. A company which has good planning and at the beginning of the year is able to say how much they're going to order has great benefits, also get better prices. And this is only possible if we do have a good controlling, and the spend cube is one of these elements which stand very much in the core of a good purchasing controlling. Now, what we have been talking about is the difference between profit impact and purchasing success. This is a big problem in practice. Profit impact is relatively clear what this is. That is what we have been discussing before. That is how the activities of purchasing generate essentially savings, which would then increase the profit or if it does not work out, decrease the profit of a company. And this is typically very, very central regarding the high percentage of purchasing volume which a modern company has. The other concept which we have distinguished from that is purchasing success. I will soon show you some examples how this is not identical. Purchasing success is the result of the activity of the purchasing department. And this activity may or may not have an impact on the balance sheet or a direct impact on the balance sheet. However, it would not be fair if we would not consider the purchasing success. On the other hand, we cannot make a good planning if we do not consider profit impact. So both of them have to be taken into consideration. What is the issue? Let's first look at a case where it works quite well. That is here the columns which you see. We have planned to spend 100 euros for a certain commodity that is in our budget. Then the first offer of a supplier of the supplies will be cost 100. Well, but then a negotiation activity takes place. In the end, we make a contract for 80. In that case, we had budgeted 100. We only pay 80. Hence, we have 20 of savings. And this is a profit impact because we increase our profit exactly by these 20 euros. It is identical in this case with the purchasing success, because if purchasing would have done nothing, we would have paid 100 to the supplier as a first offer, end of the story. However, they acted, they discussed, they negotiated, etc., and in the end paid 80, so 20 euros also as purchasing success. Fine. Now look at this case here. Same starting point. We have budgeted 100. However, suppliers are asking 120. All right, the negotiation process starts again. Let's assume that purchasing is very successful and in the end we pay 80, such as in the case before. What does it mean? The profit impact is 20, right? We have budgeted 100, we pay 80, the difference is 20. However, the purchasing success is 40 because the first offer was at 120 and we managed to reduce this to 80. So this is much more success than in the first example. And that's exactly where we see a difference between purchasing success and profit impact. And last but not least, a special case which I would like to highlight is that one. Now imagine if we do not have any previous data, which we do not have a product of the last year, and we don't know how much something is going to cost. Hence we have difficulties in making a budget. The typical case here is unexpected buys or new product development. So how can we then see what is the purchasing success? Of course, one idea could be to compare the first price against the negotiated price. Please notice that we cannot make the profit impact because we do not have a budget. However, in such a situation, in particular new product development, very often the first price is completely illusoric and it doesn't really reflect what is going on. And there a new measure has been developed. It's quite interesting. It's called price dispersion. It is the difference between the second best offer and the final offer which gets the contract. Ideally, in a perfect market, this should be close to zero, because all suppliers are competing and offering their minimum price, which is almost identical. So hence, we can see the closer we are to zero, the better we have been negotiating, and the closer the more purchasing success we have. Here in the example, we see the first price was 140, then the second best offer was 90, and we finally signed a contract for 80. Hence, the price dispersion, the last one between the second one, is 10, and this is already quite a good value. This measure also helps to decide whether the negotiation should go on in another round or not. Okay, having said this, there is one last remark which cannot be neglected and which we should definitely take into consideration. All the time now we have been talking about prices. Of course, price is important, the final price, but, and that is what the total cost of ownership concept says, price is not the only cost block of a purchased good. There may be a lot of other costs. In some products, the price may even only be the top of the iceberg. That's why this picture here. Think about acquisition costs. Now, what are acquisition costs? If you buy a pencil, the acquisition costs are relatively low. You look at the catalog, make your choice, buy it. Now take the extreme alternative example, a completely new product where we still don't really know how this should be produced. Hence, we may, for example, make a concept competition. That is, we ask the supplier to come up with some ideas on how to run or how to make this part. Then we will get several suggestions. We have to discuss this. We have to discuss with R&D, etc., etc. Go back. We probably have to change this. It is quite clear that this is a process which is more expensive, more acquisition cost than in the simple pencil case. So this is one part of the total cost of ownership. Another important aspect to take into consideration is the installation cost. Think about the software. Software is the typical case. Some software needs to be embedded into the systems of the company, and that may be complicated to establish the interfaces. Another software already has these interfaces and it works quite easily, hence the installation costs are different. Here also are involved training costs. All of this has to be involved in order to use the software. So software has very much installation costs, and that's actually where the total cost of ownership model is derived from the software environment, because definitively software has much more than just a price. Just to round it up, there are many, many other, but think about maintenance costs, about costs of, for example, fuel, or here we do have a nice example of airline seats. With airline seats, the price of the seat is relatively small. More than half of the total cost of ownership are the consequence of the fuel consumption, right? Over the life cycle of these airline seats, seats which are more heavy consume more kerosene in the end and provoke permanent costs. Hence, it can very often be an advantage to pay a little bit higher price now to get seats in the plane which are less heavy, and hence over the course of their life will induce less costs than those which maybe in the moment price better, but afterwards incur more costs. Round this up with recycling costs. And here we have an example of the total cost approach. So this is an important job for purchasing controlling, to consider total costs, not only price, and also to communicate these costs in the company and to take them into consideration when making purchasing decisions. Finally, let's have a look at a model how a controlling system of a purchasing department could like a comprehensive controlling system. One such model, and there are others which you're going to see, one such model is the balanced scorecard. Balanced scorecard is a model which emerged in the 90s and has gained a prominence in many fields, not only in purchasing, but it also works very well in purchasing. Typically, a balanced scorecard has four elements, which is the financial part, it is a customer part, it is a process part, and relates to employees and innovation. So how could this be translated into a purchasing, steering and reporting tool? Well, for example, we have to measure via key performance indicators, KPIs, the financial performance of the purchasing department. Think here about savings, think about also purchasing success. But then we have to look also at other aspects, such as the market side. How is the market or the customer reaction? And here we could have an internal and an external perspective, such as the external perspective would be something like supplier satisfaction. How satisfied are our suppliers? That could be measured. Internally, we can look at how well is purchasing performing towards the other departments, other parts of our company, such as production. Is purchasing responsible for stop in production because of stock outs, which of course would be the ultimate failure, or other things like ramp up readiness, when a new product is started, are the suppliers ready, or on-time delivery. You can imagine a lot of such key performance indicators. Then the balanced scorecard asks to look at the processes. Are the processes okay which make all of these results possible? Well, and here again, several ideas have been proposed, such as process audits. Many companies do have regular maturity profiles which are being assessed. So every 2 years, some people from headquarters or from an external authority, a university or so, come and make an assessment how good the processes are, give a point value. Another idea would be like, for example, how many preferred customer clauses are in the contracts, or how many commodities do have a perfect and a complete commodity strategy plan, etc., etc. So all of this is to ensure that the processes are okay and that it's measured, that they are well designed and executed. And last not least, we should have a look at the employees which are propelling all of this, plus the innovations which they generate. Typically, in a balanced scorecard, the employee part is measured in terms of training days. Are they getting better or not? But it's also possible to have a regular skills assessment where each employee of the purchasing department, together with his or her superior, is going to assess their skill level, add all of these up. Then you can see how the overall skill of the purchasing department is developing. Or in the worst case, it's decreasing if people with high skill base leave and young people with lower skill base come in. So that is something which you can really control for. Employee satisfaction would be another one. And last not least, the innovation part. In the last 10 years, it has become more and more common that purchasing also get as a target a contribution to innovation of the firms. More and more innovations are being produced by suppliers, not in the laboratories of an OEM anymore. And that is why this has to be measured. How many suppliers provided innovations, or how many, another measure could be early supply inclusion, how many suppliers have been included in the development phase. All of this together gives us the model of the balance scorecard, and it can help to represent externally, communicate, for example, the success, the savings towards other departments, and internally as a steering instrument, where do we have to improve, where are we getting better, and how to manage the department. There are other models as well, but balance scorecard is one of them.
KPIs work measurement metrics for evaluating performance, as it is difficult to make qualitative evaluation defining what is good, fair, adequate, and poor. When analyzing the supply chain, quantitative performance measurement can help with that. Numerical performance measures can be used when there are available data. For example, we can evaluate purchasing performance according to a number of KPIs. We can evaluate purchasing price of materials, it is increasing or decreasing. We can also look at the quality of products, for instance, amount defects in products. Another example is logistics, time of delivery, and as an addition, the speed of procurement process. Of course, we are interested to get any customer feedback, both internal and external, and it can be measured as well as a KPI. Finally, it is possible to evaluate tied-up capital and administrative costs. We can define 4 main dimensions on which measurements and evaluation of purchasing activities can be based. They are the dimensions of price and cost of purchased products and services. Then we have the dimensions of product itself and its quality. Then we have delivery and logistics dimensions. And finally, we have dimensions related to organization of purchasing activities. We can take a look on them in more detail on the next slide. The idea of measurements is to keep purchasing effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness comes from the main goals of purchasing function. To obtain the right materials in the right quantity from the right source, at the right time, at the right place, and at the right price. That is why the areas that should be monitored and evaluated also refer to the goals of purchasing. Materials price and cost, the product itself and its quality, and finally logistics pair. Efficiency in turn is linked to how purchasing is organized. It covers the resources that are required to finalize the goals of purchasing. Again, dimensions of purchasing measurements are organized accordingly, and the relationship between them is illustrated by the figure on the slide. Here are some examples of key performance indicators by the main areas. Of course, every industry might have its own performance indicators. These are only the general, widely used measurements. Firstly, there is a price or cost dimension. It refers to the price paid for materials, services purchased. Companies should monitor any changes in price that they pay for materials and services to prevent them getting out of control, especially increase of the price. Of course, price and cost reductions should be also monitored, as it might be a result of searches of alternative material or suppliers that initiates the decrease of material costs. Example of measures here are materials budget, price inflation reports, variances reports, etc. Secondly, there is a product or service quality dimension. In new product development, it is important to indicate if the project is getting out of the control in terms of cost or time to market. Companies measure number of personal hours spent purchasing on innovation projects, the number of engineering hours spent by suppliers, the project overall lead time. Also, after product specification, there are already such metrics as reject rates on incoming goods, line reject rates, number of approved certified or ISO certified suppliers, and the number of those, to ensure that materials and so on are used to control the quality of the goods and services purchased. Thirdly, there is a delivery and logistics dimension of an incoming flow of materials and services. From this point of view, accuracy of purchasing request, on-time delivery, and quantity control are evaluated. Companies are interested to measure purchasing administrative lead time, order backlog, delivery reliability, shortages, often to keep the inventory level. Companies monitor inventory turnover rate, over and under delivery, average order size, etc.